Hello, I'm Michael of Seven Winds Flutes, and I'm putting together a little introductory video to share the information I've learned about making flutes. I've been making flutes since about 2010, and to be honest with you, though I'm not Native American, I've had a lot of wonderful Native American friends and teachers that show me a perspective about the flute. It's not real common. Otherwise, the spiritual qualities of the flute. For me, making a flute is a spiritual experience. I can tell when I'm moving in accordance with Great Spirit, and I can tell when I'm not. Anyway, I thought I'd put together a series of these videos to share the information I've been learning about how to make a flute and what's involved. I've got somewhat of a scientific background, and my approach is different than many. I try and look at it from a scientific perspective. I also try and look at it from a spiritual perspective. There's always been like two schools of people, it seems, going all the way back to Pythagoras, who was trying to define the world from a scientific perspective. And then on the other side of the coin, you have the Essenes, who were more involved with a community style of living and recognizing how they fit into life, how they fit in on the planet. I think many of the qualities of the Essenes were similar to Native Americans. Anyway, at age 62, I was wondering what I'm going to be when I grow up. And if somebody told me I was going to be a flute maker, I would have told them they were crazy. Around 2010, I built this shop and began wondering, well, what am I going to do here? I loved the flute. I had a lot of flute music. I played some flute, not very well. And I thought, I wonder if I can make a flute. So I began Googling and getting all the information I could on how to make a flute. And I recognized that there were unlimited approaches, unlimited techniques. Everybody had their technique. I began getting really confused because I might take the technique from one flute maker and then combine it with a technique from this flute maker, and though each individually worked together, when I took that information and tried to make a flute, it got very, very confusing. And a lot of times it didn't work. So I had to begin sorting out and coming up with my own individual way of making a flute. And that's why I thought I'd put together these videos to share that way with as much information as I could. You see, I firmly believe that this great spirit that somehow motivated or moved me into making flutes, the time, the resources all became available once I got onto that purpose. And so it's kind of like, in some regards, I'm an adoption agency for flutes. I make flutes, and the great flute spirit makes certain they go to the right people. Anyway, I'm going to give you a short tour of the shop, show the equipment that I use. I do use a lot of equipment. I don't know, I call it handmade, and that I'm the sole creator of the flutes with the assistance of the Spirit. But it's necessary to utilize the equipment, otherwise I'd only make a flute about once every 3 or 4 months. Anyway, I'm going to pause this for now, and I'll give you a little tour of the shop. The shop is small, a little bit bigger than a 2-car garage. It's a 20 by 24 metal building that I had put in. I began to recognize there's no way I could accurately tune a flute unless I got heating and air conditioning, and I put in closed cell foam insulation so I could get a consistent temperature by which to tune flutes. Well, I'll pause for now and I'll do a little walk around tour, kind of showing you the equipment, and then we'll go from there. Okay, I'm at the doorway looking inside the shop, and I'll try and be steady with the camera. It's a 20 by 24 shop. I have 10-foot sidewalls, and enabled me to put a loft for storage up above. It also allowed clearance to set in my dust collection system. That dust collector hanging down there captures the fine particle dust, whereas the other system picks up the coarser sawdust. I use 6-inch water pipe to build this manifold, and the manifold feeds down to my cyclone dust collector, which I'll show you right here. I'm sorry if this is a little jiggly. Anyway, the cyclone collector is about 8.5, 9 feet tall, something like that. And it goes up to this exhaust system, and then from the 6-inch pipe goes down to 4-inch pipe, sometimes down to 2.5-inch pipe to the equipment itself. One of my frequently used tools is I've got this cabinet saw, Craftsman. I utilize that to cut wood down to the 3 basic sizes. I use 1.5 by 1.5, 1.25 by 1.25, and 1 inch by 1 inch. And from the cabinet saw, I'll utilize this DeWalt planer. Now this is the second planer that I've had. The beauty of this planer is it has very little snipe. Also, it has a blower fan inside of it, so it doesn't just it blows the chips and the sawdust into the exhaust system. Almost nothing ends up on the floor compared to the one I had previously. I'd have as much on the floor as was sucked up into the exhaust. Got that little rigid belt sander, also functions as a spindle sander, a small, inexpensive bandsaw from DeWalt, and it's almost an antique radial arm saw, DeWalt, but I tell you, they don't make tools today like they did in the past. The ones in the past are far better built. Then I've got a 17-inch grizzly bandsaw for resawing wood. I don't do too much resawing. Maybe someday. And I was also going to use it for making cutting limbs. Thinking of making branch flutes. I have a relatively inexpensive lathe. It's a shop box. Not terribly impressed with the lathe, but it's what I could afford at the time. Then on top of it, I have a Vega lathe duplicator. The sweet part about the lathe duplicator is it enables me to turn a flute in about 5 minutes. The important part is it maintains a consistent wall thickness, and running the router really speeds things up. This is one of the template. I can follow that template and change templates in order to change the shape of the flute. Now usually from the blowhole up to the true sound hole, I'll go ahead and I'll use the lathe chisels. I don't like everything to be the same. I'm not interested in making cookie cutter flutes. Now certainly some of my starter flutes are much simpler, nothing sophisticated in design or anything else, but just a good flute to learn on. That's one of the Mitsubishi mini split system. I utilize that. I've got two of them. And that yellow up there, that's the closed cell foam insulation for the shop. I use closed cell foam because that not only does it have superior insulating properties, it also adds considerable rigidity or structural integrity to the building. This is my boring machine. I put a couple of videos up on the boring machine and have some of the details of that, plus a demonstration of how to bore. Utilizing gun drills, simple drill press, but this is one of the tools I probably use more than any tool in the shop almost. It's a Grizzly end mill. The true sound hole area is particularly critical. I mean, that's where 90% of the voice is created. And if you can't maintain consistency in dimensions, it becomes very difficult. This enables me to hold very close tolerances on the true sound hole. It can also be used for a multitude of other things in terms of carving birds and that type of thing. This just kind of general workspace bench clutter, and this area I use a lot. This is a test board that I'm going to do some YouTube videos on. It enables me to demonstrate flute stability. I call it dynamic range. I can demonstrate how to measure empirically your K1 and K2. It also, I can show on the computers how to see the harmonic distortion created by a flute, giving you greater insight to the true sound hole configuration and the voice of the flute. Sharpening, that's kind of tucked away over here. This is Paco, the fat cat, my shop cat. I utilize a wet stone grinder for rough, and also use the Work Sharp system for sharpening chisels. And I also use the end mill. I take the plates from the Work Sharp system, and I can put them on the end mill and reverse the direction and change the speed and a lot more precisely than I can using this, but it's a good tool. And I've got a 4-axis, it's the Shark Pro, and has a 24 by 36 inch bed. I store programs, the computer was over on the desk. I store programs in the computer which have tuning hole configurations, and so for a particular flute I can put it in there, find the bore center, and then it'll drill a pilot hole for the tuning holes. And it keeps them nice and straight. It also keeps them in a permanent record. So with that, that's about it. And if you have any questions or anything, I'd be happy to answer them by email.